Good morning, friends and enemies. In today's video, we are going through 8 players that I think have legit league winning upside. The guys at the end of the year when we look back on that, you look at the draft board from September and you say, damn, I nailed that round 2, 3, and 7 pick, and that's the reason I won my league. Now, I want to be very clear. These are not necessarily guys that I am advocating as must-draft players or guys that I'll be targeting in every league, but they are guys that I think I can make very good arguments for their upside being that of the league-breaking type. A lot of these guys are really good players that you have to spend really heavy draft capital on, all right? These are not just like sleepers in round 10 or 14 that break leagues, because how rarely does that actually happen? Not very often, but I will say I did filter out anyone who has already had a season in which they've averaged 20 or more PPR fantasy points per game. So no Jamar Chase, Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon, Bijan, C-Mac, Derrick Henry, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Amon-Ra, St. Brown. So I left pretty much everybody else on the table. And of course, you look at any first or second round player, and I think that if any of them ended up averaging 20, 25 points per game, you wouldn't be shocked by it. But these are the guys in the earlier rounds that I think have the most legitimate case to be made. And if you enjoy this video, make sure you hit the button that looks like this. We'll be making videos like this all summer long, so make sure you are subscribed. And ironically, we'll start the list off with, I said there's not a lot of guys in rounds 10, 12, 14, 16 that end up making this list. But this guy just a couple of years ago was a very late round pick that we had nailed, and that is Mr. Puka Nacua. Current ADP, 7th overall. He is the wide receiver 4 behind that first tier of players of Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, and then it's Puka. I've got absolutely zero problems with this ADP. When I look at the Rams in 2025, I think overall they're a relatively fragile team, but they've built up a base of just unbelievably high-end blue chip players, Puka Nacua being one of them. And what I think we're going to see this year with Cooper Kupp not there anymore, Devontae Adams playing a pure outside role, and Puka Nacua playing that Cooper Kupp of 2021 role. Right now, Puka is tied in Vegas with the second highest receiving yardage total amongst any receiver, only below Jamar Chase. Puka Nacua is a stupidly versatile player, right? And when Cooper Kupp came into the league, he was a zone beater. He was a dude that could separate all over the middle of the field because he could find the soft spots. And he was never really more than an above average man separator, right? He was obviously a really smart receiver, and he improved as the years went by. But let's not act like Sean McVay's system and Matt Stafford coming over weren't a large reason for why he broke out and went crazy. Because the first few years he was in the league, he was a good receiver, but not a great receiver. Him and Robert Woods were neck and neck production year over year. Puka Nacua came in and blasted off immediately, and now you don't have Cooper Kupp. And I think with him in that role, the guy who's motioning and the guy who's moving around and the guy who's never really needing to separate on man coverage, we'll see 10 to 12 targets a game. And I've got news for you. If you start looking at the separation stats, I think there's a very strong case to be made that Puka is already a better pure receiver and a separator than Cooper Kupp ever was in his career. These are Puka's RP numbers from Matt Harmon's reception perception. 85th percentile success rate versus man coverage, 91st versus zone, 92nd versus press. Those are elite amongst the elites. He is as good of a separator in the NFL as any receiver there is. And the other part about Puka and this projection is there is no projection or conjecture here or hyperbole. The only thing that Puka has ever done since he stepped on the field as a receiver is be great on an NFL field. Rookie year, 17.6 fantasy points per game. Next year, 18.8 PPR fantasy points per game. The man's averages 9.5 targets per game in his year 1 and year 2 numbers. That is crazy. He's about to hit his prime, and he's already averaging over 160 targets per season if we are assuming health, which is obviously a big concern for Puka, but this is a video about upside. There are a lot of players that we like to project for this crazy upside. We look at glimpses, 2 weeks here, 4 weeks here, 3 weeks here. Puka, 9.5 targets per game. We have a 28 game sample size. And last year when Puka came back from his injury, he became the primary motion man. The role that Cooper Kupp became so prestigious for, the man that was moving around on every single play, got all those dump offs, line of scrimmage, screen plays. Puka became that guy over the second half of the year, and you saw it reflected in his statistics. And I think that's going to be his role permanently going into this year. So when he comes out and he starts catching 9 balls a game immediately, regardless of Devontae Adams, like he's going to be good as well. But I think Puka has the ability to catch 120, 130 balls this year. Even if he doesn't explode for 15 or 17 touchdowns, I think his PPR numbers will be so enticing that he could legit break fantasy this year wherever you get him in the first round. Vegas has his touchdown totals at 5.5, which is, excruciatingly low. I don't blame them because he hasn't been a touchdown scorer, but I do think you look again at what Cooper Kupp did year 1. He was like 6 touchdowns. Year 2, he was 5 touchdowns, and then he became a primary red zone threat. You got a guy like Puka averaging almost 10 targets a game. Those are eventually going to convert into touchdowns. And he's had 6 his first year, 3 his second year. Like, this could be a year where he explodes and becomes a 10, 11, 12 touchdown catch guy, plus 120 receptions, 175 targets. So, case in point, I just imagine Puka Nacua, a better man separator than Cooper Kupp had ever been in his career, playing the Cooper Kupp role from 2021 that obviously earned him the Triple Crown. So Puka, like if you've owned him in fantasy at any point over the last 2 years, you understand when he is in your lineup, he is one of the best players and you would not move him for a thing. And that is the way I'm looking at Puka going into year 3. Second player on this list, I would say he's kind of like the Puka of running backs, and that is Devon Achane, the running back out of Miami. Current ADP, 14th overall. So you're talking about the early second round, the RB7. When you look at how his career is kind of fleshed out so far, in year 1, he obviously got it done via the ground game, averaging like 8 yards per carry. It was actually insane. And then year 2, last year, of course, he got it done through receptions and the receiving yardage total. And it's just kind of proved that he can play on any down and be a part of any offense and be a ridiculous weapon regardless. And he had always been great via the receiving game. Like he had 60 catches in his last 2 years at college. And a lot of times, like you have these running backs who are really athletic and they prove it in college, but then it depends on the system that they go into in the NFL, whether or not the coach lets them realize that upside. And they did that with Achane. I didn't even realize that he actually won the Triple Crown amongst running backs last year. Most catches, most receiving yards, most receiving touchdowns. That was all Achane. Like last 2 years, rookie year, 17.3 fantasy points per game. Last year, 17.6 fantasy points per game. Like I said, just like Puka, knocking on the door. We're not fake imagining him being good. We're not taking incredibly small sample sizes. We're not saying, oh, he looked really good in this game. Oh, he looked really good for these 2 or 3 games. Like these are 2-year samples of 2 of the best players in the NFL that we're just waiting for the situation to break a little bit more right for them to break fantasy. And it's funny because you think about Achane last year and you think about the Miami ground game, and in my head, I'm like, he was kind of bad on the ground. The Miami run game was bad on the ground, which is true, but he really wasn't. He averaged 4.5 yards per carry, which is actually a miracle behind that offensive line. 4.5 yards per carry is very, very good amongst other NFL running backs. It was just bad based on what he did as a rookie. 7.8 yards per carry. He only really had a handful of 20-plus yard breakaway runs last year. I think he had 5 or 6 of them, and you've got to think that that starts to break more into Achane's favor because that is obviously what he's known for, his speed, his breakaway, big playability, and I think that starts to get back into the realm of, double-digit type runs in that sense. So with the offensive line, still a problem for sure. They did lose Teron Armstead to retirement, but a lot of times, when players are towards their retirement age, they are kind of playing that way. So could be a big loss, could just be a name that we're saying at this point in his career. But they did bring in 3 new offensive linemen, Patrick Paul, James Daniels, and Jonah. I'm not even going to try to say his name. If you're a Dolphins fan or you watch any of the NFL draft, then you know who I'm talking about, Jonah Savainia. So remains to be seen if they're actually going to be better on the offensive line or we're just saying names and hope. But regardless, he was really good last year without them. With Achane, easy to just look at his size and say like, does he ever get the 3-down workhorse role? I don't know that it actually matters because he gets it done in every asset of the game. Again, last 2 years has averaged over 17 PPR fantasy points per game. He has scored 11 and 12 touchdowns over the last 2 years, so he is a touchdown scorer, certifiable. And when you look at the games in which Tua plays, he does average over 20 PPR fantasy points per game when Tua is on the field, right? And last year in 2024, the games in which Tua played, he averaged over 22 fantasy points per game. And despite his stature, they used him on the goal line. Like he had 14 carries inside the 5-yard line. That is the same number as Joe Mixon. That is more than James Conner. That is 1 fewer than James Cook, who had 1,000 touchdowns last year. The guy who was second on the team, Raheem Mostert, was just 4. So you're talking about a guy who had 10 fewer goal line touches is now gone. Obviously, Raheem Mostert's not here anymore. And they just have a bunch of schlubs behind him. Like Jalen Wright, I hate to break it to you guys, but he's not good. Like the guy has 0-0 vision. They showed no sort of propensity to get him onto the field and let him have a large role in this offense. And then they go and draft Ollie Gordon, and then they sign Alexander Mattison. These are just guys in the backfield that if you need to give touches away from Achane, you can do it to them. And I think we totally buried the lead here, and that's the fact that Jonnu Smith is no longer here. Jonnu Smith had a 20% target share, which is a huge number for a tight end. So we talk about those manufactured touches. We talk about those line of scrimmage screens. So like, here's what I'm kind of advocating for. Achane, the passing game was all year 2. I don't see how that changes in year 3, given that Tua sees the single highest rate of cover 2 coverage, meaning they play safeties deep so they can't beat him with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, which led to all the dump-offs, which means Achane racks up receptions. Now you don't have Jonnu Smith, which was the next most targeted guy around the line of scrimmage. Like Achane's receiving totals are going to be so high from a floor standpoint, and if we have a little bit more luck break his way in terms of like big plays, instead of 5 20-plus yard rushes, we have, 11 or 12, and a couple of those go for touchdowns. I mean, you're talking about, again, like a Jamal Charles type of season. And we actually did a betting preview video on our bets channel a couple of weeks ago where we were like giving out very, very, very spicy takes. But Devon Achane, 1,000, anybody? 1,000 rushing yards, receiving yards, maybe 12, 14 touchdowns. How you doing? Could be in the cards. And lastly, I'll just leave you with this little puff piece here. Omar Kelly is one of the more prominent beat reporters for the Miami Dolphins, and he wrote an article, top performer of camp so far is Devon Achane. This is the second straight offseason which Achane has gotten this honor, and it's not surprising consider he's faster without pads than anyone else on the roster. His ability to catch passes and get upfield is eye-opening. It was on display Tuesday. So case in point was like, he said the exact same thing last year going into sophomore year. Achane was obviously amazing, and he's just doubling down on it and saying Achane is exactly who we think he is, and he's the best player in our offense right now. So I think Devon Achane can legitimately break fantasy football this year. He is one of the must-draft players on my list, and because I love y'all, I actually worked all weekend making this little cheat sheet for you guys, which is going to be completely free. All you got to do is download the Pickett app with code BDGE. You don't got to pay anything. You don't got to put a credit card in or anything like that. The Pickett app is actually where you track sports bets. It's like a social sports bet tracking app, which you can go see any bets that I take, right? I'm making a lot of these Vegas prediction videos and telling you where lines are good, where lines are bad. I am personally taking a lot of the lines that I talk about in the videos. So if you ever want to track what I am taking throughout the summer and you want to tail it, Pickett is like a social app where you can follow people on it. You could also sync your sports books that you sign up for, whether you're on, DraftKings or MGM or whatever the case may be. This app has it all in there. So anyone who downloads it for the first time with code BDGE, you're going to be sent a fantasy football cheat sheet, which is my top 100 rankings for the season. It shows you my top 100 players, where I have them ranked relative to ECR, so expert consensus rankings. And then on that cheat sheet, players will be labeled must draft players, value picks, sleepers, bad value picks, and then complete fades on there. All right. So it's a little cheat sheet to show y'all love, to show y'all appreciation, but you must be new to Pickett. You must download the app. It will automatically send it to you. They also have a lot of cool like subscriptions on Pickett. If you happen to be someone who spends a lot of time and money on the books, they've got Pickett Pro, which is a paid plan on their website. But again, you don't have to sign up for that in order to get the cheat sheet. But when you're on there, you might find it really cool because they have like closing line value analysis. They have line movement and historical odds. So if you ever wanted to go back and look at how odds stacked up, I know a lot of you guys asked about that for the Vegas videos, being like, how did the lines look last year, whatever. They've got all that on there. But regardless, download Pickett. You'll get the cheat sheet sent to you automatically via email. And you will see both Puka and Devon Achane labeled as must-draft players for the upcoming season. Next guy on this list is not necessarily a must-draft player for me, but he is as enticing as any player can be in fantasy football this year. And that is Mr. Bucky Irving, the running back for Tampa Bay. Current ADP, 22nd overall, running back 10. So you're talking about the back end of the second round. And it's hard not to love what Bucky did as a rookie. One of the most elusive, one of the most explosive, one of the funnest running backs that we had emerge on the scene, especially in a class that didn't really have a lot of good rookie running backs. It was pretty much Bucky Irving, Tyrone Tracy, and then a bunch of career backups after that. Bucky Irving is now, like, we don't get the small running back discount anymore, right? Like 5 years ago, 7 years ago, if you played fantasy football back then, you look at a guy with Bucky size, you look at a guy with Devon Achane size, and regardless of how good they were, regardless of how much production they had, you still got a discount because people did not believe that they could be good again. They did not believe that they could hold up with that size. That's not the case for Bucky anymore. 5'9", 192, runs a 4.55. So you're talking about like a kind of unathletic, like smaller back. But I do see a world where he has a season similar to Austin Eckler in a sense. Like, not the traditional build, but he is just so good in every asset of the game, tied to a good offensive line and a good offense, that the floor is high. And I think if touchdowns break right, which they were close to last year, he could have an unbelievable season because he is so efficient. And that's how Austin Eckler started out before Melvin Gordon held out. If you remember, Austin Eckler was continuously one of the most elusive backs in the NFL on a small sample size. One of the guys that ranked top 5 in yards created per touch and just yards per touch. Like, he was just getting it done every single time he touched the ball. And last year, when you look at Bucky's numbers, yards per carry, 4th in the NFL behind only Derrick Henry, Saquon, and Jahmyr Gibbs. That's a pretty damn good list. Number 1 in the NFL in yards after contact per attempt, which is crazy for a dude his size. Number 3 in the NFL in evaded tackles per attempt behind only Kenneth Walker and James Conner. Like, obviously, he didn't become the guy until halfway through the season. He was the RB14 in fantasy last year, despite ranking 34th in opportunity share amongst running backs. When you look at the second half of the year, again, he didn't become the guy until the second half of the year. I mean, you look at those numbers, the last 8 games of the season, over 18 PPR points per game. And while we might not realize the upside based on Rachaad White still being very involved in the receiving game, 3 receptions per game still paces out to over 50 receptions on the season. So if you're talking about 50 catches, you're talking about 265 total rush attempts. Like, you give Bucky, a dude with unbelievable efficiency in a high-scoring offense, over 315 touches, he's going to explode. When I look at the backfield, I think it would be quite ignorant to just assume Rachaad White is not going to have a role anymore. Rachaad White is not a good runner of the football. We've known that. Even in years when we wanted to draft him, we were like, he's not an efficient runner. He's more athlete than he is pure running back, but he's a good athlete, and he's a very good pass catcher. So I don't imagine that they completely phase him out of the offense by any means. But Bucky in his own right is a very good pass catcher. And if they start to move more into like early down screens, early down dump offs, which is going to be Bucky's complete role, like first, second down goal line is probably going to be the majority of Bucky. I mean, he had a 13.1% college target share in his offense in Oregon, which is in the 91st percentile. And again, last 8 games of the season, he averaged over 27 receiving yards per game, which paces out to 463 receiving yards on the year. That's a huge number. He was top 10 in yards per target, number 7 in yards after contact per reception. What's really important, I think, given his size, is how he outnumbered Rachaad White in terms of red zone carries, 38-21, and then goal line 13-8. And I think you're going to see those numbers skew even more with Bucky going into the year as the one. And what's actually more kind of enticing is from weeks 10 to 18, Bucky actually saw more red zone targets than Rachaad White did. And we did have the news come out recently of Tristan Wirfs likely starting on the PUP and missing the first 4 weeks. And I get it, that could shy people away from taking players on the Bucs, or it might be like a tiebreaker from one point or another. Maybe that means they run a little bit less. Maybe that does mean more check downs and dump offs to the running back position. I'm not really going to try to project out what 4 games of Tristan Wirfs missing means for Bucky Irving over the course of the entire season. Obviously, it's not a good thing, but I will say that their offensive line overall ranked very, very, very highly among the NFL. So he's not the only good player on their offensive line. And they do have all 5 starters outside of Wirfs coming back. So the continuity is there. He'll obviously need a replacement for the time being, but once he is back, they have all their same guys on the offensive front, and that will again be a very good offensive line. Okay, so after Bucky, we're moving back to Malik Nabers, current ADP 8. Wide receiver 5. Just like, I don't know, Malik is one of those dudes when you just watch him play. I remember watching him at LSU and like scouting his film and being like, holy shit, like this is one of them dudes that just, there's just no way he can be bad at football. Like, he just jumps off the screen when you watch him play. Insane volume last year, 170 targets in 15 games. They didn't add any receiving competition, 0 receiving competition for Malik Nabers, and upgraded, in theory, their quarterback position. Either Russ or Jameis, or if Jackson Dart, first-round quarterback, is good. And I think when you think about like Brian Daboll, you look at the Giants offense, you don't really know what their identity is, but he wants to throw the ball, man. And I think as a coach, that's what his identity typically would be if he had a quarterback that he trusted and was comfortable with. And I also think with Russ, like, while he might be later stage Russ and not that great of a quarterback anymore, he does love to throw those moon balls, man. We saw what him and George Pickens did together last year. I can't wait to see what Malik Nabers does with a guy who's willing to throw it deep, because if you remember back in college, Jaden Daniels and Malik Nabers played together. Like, that's what Jaden Daniels does so well, is those moon balls, is taking shots downfield, is giving Malik those quick hitters with the yak ability, letting him do what he does with the ball in his hands after the catch. And we didn't really see a lot of that with Malik Nabers last year. Number 4 in the NFL in unrealized air yards. And I mean, listen, if you just look at the target numbers by week last year, some of these numbers are insane. At worst, he was getting 8, 9 targets. Like, those were bad weeks for him, but you have 18, 12, 15, 13, 11, 10, 13, 10, 14, 14. Like, man, if I take a receiver as explosive and as good as Malik Nabers, and you're just going to give him 12, 13, 15 targets a game, I don't really care who the quarterback is. Like, he's going to get it done for you. So, Malik, if a quarterback plays well for Malik at any point during his career, he's going to be probably the #1 player in fantasy football. Obviously, that's a big if up until then, but like, it is plain to see that Malik is the next guy up at the position. So let's keep on moving to Rashee Rice, wide receiver, Kansas City. He is number 5 on the list. Current ADP, 35 overall, wide receiver, 16. So you're talking about in the 3rd round. I think his ADP will continue moving up and up and up and up and up. I don't have much to contribute here that you guys don't already know about Rashee Rice. You know, outside of the injury, which apparently all signs are pointing towards him being very, very healthy for the start of the year, which is a little bit surprising, to be honest with you, because it was a serious injury that obviously cost him the entire season. But, you know, the Chiefs are really excited, and they've had no limitations on him so far throughout practice. So it feels like he's a full go. And when he's a full go, if you look at the numbers, last 14 healthy games, almost 7 catches, almost 80 yards, 8.8 targets per game. If you look at basically what we've seen from Rashee Rice over the last, sample that we have from him, the last 10 games of the 2023 season, Rice averaged 17.2 PPR fantasy points per game, including games of 24.7 points, 20.2, 24.1, 27, like legit league winning weeks. And that was just in 2023 as a rookie. The start to 2024 was obviously legendary, as any of y'all remember that drafted him, because we were very heavily pushing him on this channel. 17.3, 18.5 points, 29.1 points en route to a disgusting season before getting hurt. But yeah, man, I'm just excited for Rice. Like, we saw Travis Kelce have a good season based on volume. I think like all of those targets and catches were supposed to be Rashee Rice. I think this offense is going to run through him in the passing game. I think them re-signing Hollywood Brown is a good thing for Rice, because now you can just have a guy who's just playing outside and taking the top off of the defense without getting really heavily involved. I think Xavier Worthy's a guy who you're like drawing up plays and targets for, but Rice is the possession guy who I think will get the majority of the targets throughout the year and see a 26, 27, 28% target share from Patrick Mahomes. And you're giving a receiver 27% of the targets from Patrick Mahomes, and yeah, he could win you your league. Moving down to player number 6. I just want to drop this in there one more time. If you enjoy the video, just make sure you hit the button that looks like this. Again, the thumbs up, I look at those numbers, I look at the data, and I say, okay, this video had a lot of thumbs up. That means that they like this style of video maybe more than the others. So, anytime, just thinking from a creator standpoint, if you're watching a YouTube video and you're like, I fuck with this video, like, just give the creator a thumbs up. It lets us know, so we have a direction of where to go in our content. A direction that you can go in your drafts could be number 6, Kenneth Walker, running back out of Seattle. Current ADP, 43, RB 15. So mid-4th round, I think that's a decent price for him. I've never really been one of those guys that's like die on a sword for Kenneth Walker dudes. I think there are guys that have been those guys since he's came into the league, and everyone's played whack-a-mole trying to figure out the correct year for when Kenneth Walker is going to break out. But again, this video is not necessarily a prediction video of like, I've never said Kenneth Walker was going to do it, but now I'm saying it this year. No, I'm just saying we can acknowledge the crazy upside that this man's has as one of the more elusive, explosive backs in the NFL that just hasn't been able to put a full year together yet. If you look at what he did last year before he got hurt, fantasy points per game to start the year last year, 18.9, 33.6, 14.6, 20.9, 23.3. I mean, you're talking about a legit league-winning running back last year. So when I started to look at what does he have going for him this year, he had a career high in the receiving department last year by a wide margin. You bring in Clint Kubiak. He was the OC for the Saints last year. Peppers Alvin Kamara. So I imagine he knows a thing or two about getting the running backs involved in the passing game. Kenneth Walker had a 13.8% target share last year in the Seattle offense, which was 4th amongst running backs in the NFL last year. They lose both Tyler Lockett and they lose DK Metcalf, okay? So, I mean, there's opportunity to be had. They upgraded their offensive line, obviously, Gray Zabel coming in, but they're still going to need to be a lot better, and this has always been my concern with Kenneth Walker, because amongst 36 qualified running backs last year, Kenneth Walker ranked dead last in terms of yards before contact per attempt. So you're talking about just the yards that his offensive line gave him. 0.8 yards before contact per attempt, dead last in the NFL. That has nothing to do with him. That's the offensive line. But that doesn't matter. If that's what the offensive line is going to give him, that's what we have to work with as fantasy players. Last year, number 1 in the NFL in avoided tackles per attempt. 32.7% of his runs had a forced missed tackle. Number one in the NFL. Again, he hasn't proven that he could stay healthy. We have all these like small sample sizes of him being very explosive and elusive and all of that kind of shit. But at the end of the day, like if he can't put it together for a full season, I don't know. He keeps letting the door open up for a guy like Zach Charbonnet, who had a ton of touchdowns last year and has looked pretty good and could be a high impact player in an offense as a nice 1B. And I think if you're in an offense where you are splitting carries and splitting work, it's really hard to be a league winning player, although we did just see Jahmyr Gibbs kind of do it last year. So I won't put it past Kenneth Walker, but he needs to stay healthy for the whole year. And yeah, man, he's close. He's close, but it's anyone's guess if he could do it this upcoming year. Let's move to another running back. We have two more running backs to round out this list. Number 7, that is Chase Brown, running back out of Cincinnati from weeks 4 through 18 last year. So a legitimate sample size. He was amongst the elites, man, in fantasy points per game. It was Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, Saquon, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, and then Chase Brown. That's damn near the whole season. That's not a small sample size. That's almost the whole season. Zach Taylor's come out plenty this offseason already and has continued to praise Chase Brown, continued to say that he outperformed expectations and he will continue to be the guy there. And when you look at this tweet, I mean, it's not really a huge tweet to, I guess, really dive into because most of this is Joe Mixon. But then we did just see the transfer over to Chase Brown. Just the RB1 opportunity shares under Zach Taylor, who is their head coach, of course. Joe Mixon was always over 74%. Chase Brown last year was 73%. So they have chosen to use a workhorse there in Cincinnati. Last year, it was much more of a forced workhorse role, obviously, because Zach Moss got hurt. When you look at the actual touches per game last year per Hayden Winks over here, 2024 Chase Brown season, weeks 1 through 5, he was obviously behind Zach Moss, 10.2 touches per game. Weeks 6 through 8 as the 1A, 14.3 touches per game. Zach Moss gets hurt, and then he's averaging 23.6 touches per game. Crazy work. The tough part about predicting this is like, okay, so they draft Taj Brooks in the 6th round, not overly worried about him. They do bring in both Samaje Perine and bring back Zach Moss. And the tricky part is like, we didn't see Zach Moss ever return. Like we didn't see Zach Moss come back for weeks like 15 through 18 and Chase Brown continue to hold the 23 touch role. They did bring in Khalil Herbert, but he was an absolute cone for them last year. So can't really compare the two with, 2 or 3 other viable backs in the backfield. And viable is a strong word because Zach Moss and Samaje Perine are literally just placeholders for 3.2 yards per carry. But I think Chase Brown, like when I look at the offense and what I look at the Bengals overall as a team, when we try to paint the picture of how this offense plays out, it's going to be a bad defense again. It's going to be an atrocious defense again. They got Shamar Stewart holding out still. You got Trey Hendrickson probably not showing up for practice anytime soon because he wants his contract. Sam Hubbard retires. Like they don't have any pressure off of the edge, and they were already not good as a defense last year, one of the worst in the NFL. So like if their defense is really bad again and they're going to need to be in shootouts every single week, that just lends itself to Chase Brown being on the field often and catching a ton of passes. Again, their run game just became dump offs to Chase Brown and then shots to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And I think that's probably what we're going to see. Like, I'm not expecting Chase Brown to rush for 1,600 yards, but I can see him going for 900 to 1,050 on the ground, plus another 55, 60 catches, 400 yards, 3 to 5 touchdowns through the air. And that's going to get him to the point where he is a certified blue chip RB1 in your lineup, okay? So we love ourselves a little Chase Brown. And the last player on this list is going to be the most surprising to a lot of y'all because I wasn't a huge fan of him as a pure prospect or as a runner, but that is RJ Harvey, the running back out in Denver, who is the 2nd round pick for them this year. He's currently going 57th overall. His ADP has dropped since they've signed J.K. Dobbins. He is the RB21. You're talking about the back end of the 5th round. Where this take comes from, or where this opinion comes from, is looking back at Alvin Kamara's rookie year, man. Like, I'm not sure that it matters how good RJ Harvey is going to be on the ground or how much volume he even gets on the ground in order for him to be a massive fantasy player this year. The setup for RJ Harvey right now relative to what Alvin Kamara had as a rookie in 2017. Let me just throw this stat out there for you. In Alvin Kamara's rookie year, 2017, the guy averaged 19.7 fantasy points per game, so nearly 20 fantasy points per game as a rookie with 120 carries. 120 carries, 20 fantasy points per game. That made me say, like, damn, it doesn't really matter what RJ Harvey does on the ground because Sean Payton's going to get it done for his running backs. So when we look at the two situations, eerily similar. You have day 2 capital for both backs. You have 2 very good pass catching backs. You have Sean Payton running their offense. When you look at their offensive line situations, crazy similar. The offensive line in New Orleans in 2017, number 2 in pass blocking, number 10 in run blocking. The offensive line in Denver in 2024, number 1 in pass blocking, number 11 in run blocking, all right? So you're talking about one ranking spot off in both categories per PFF. Both of them sharing a backfield with a veteran runner. In 2017, Mark Ingram had 230 carries. We have J.K. Dobbins coming in. I don't even know if you want to give him that much credit. Is he going to have 230 carries? Doubtful. And the schedule for Denver really isn't that scary. Like, yeah, they have to play the AFC West, obviously, being in that division, but they get to play the AFC South, which is probably the weakest division in football. They get the Bengals, which are a good team, but they're going to have to score a lot of points. You get the Jets, the Giants, the Raiders twice, obviously, within their division. Washington, which is a high-scoring game. Like, good schedule. And I just look at the similarities. Kamara had 120 carries as a rookie and damn near 20 fantasy points per game. And I can't emphasize how much I think Kamara is a better in-between the tackles runner and a pure runner than RJ Harvey is, but I'm not sure it matters in this current situation. So in full PPR leagues, I think there's a world where RJ Harvey just goes crazy because Sean Payton is so good at scheming up running back receptions, and he's got so little competition in that backfield for that role. The downside for Harvey would be I don't know how much early down work he gets. I don't know how many goal line carries he gets, and he's not a good pass blocker at all, so I don't know how many third down he gets. This is obviously painting a very, very tight picture for him, but you just can't ignore the similarities between RJ Harvey's situation, Sean Payton, and Alvin Kamara's rookie year. All right? So just to recap, 8 players that I think have legit league-winning upside: Puka, Devon, Achane, Bucky, Irving, Malik, Nabers, Rashee Rice, Kenneth Walker, Chase Brown, and RJ Harvey. If you want the top 100 BDGE rankings cheat sheet, which will get updated the first of each month going forward, download the Pickett app, follow me on there, sync your books, all that good stuff. Hit the button that looks like this. Let me know you enjoyed the video, and subscribe to the channel if you're new. We'll be making a bunch of videos like this throughout the rest of the summer. I'm out of here. I love y'all. Smoochies.